Hello and welcome to our second roundtable discussion on sustainability in the construction and quarrying industries, brought to you by World Highways and Aggregates Business. This is a huge and vital topic for anyone bidding to work in our industry, and to help you navigate a way through all the noise and debate out there, we've brought together three figures from leading technology suppliers in the industry. Jeremy Harsin, Global Construction Market Director for Cummins. Pontus Evertsson, Head of Product Management for wheeled loaders as well as articulated and rigid dump trucks at Volvo CE. And Michael Gomes, Vice President for Global Sustainability and Corporate Social Responsibility at Topcon Positioning Group. We wanted to speak to them about what is happening right now on site, as well as where smart technology is going to take us in the future. It's all about survival, not just as a company, but also as an industry. How are we going to build a more sustainable planet? Where are the good ideas? And what do they look like? How is it all going to work? Jeremy, how does your company demonstrate sustainability on construction and aggregate sites right now?
Cummins is a market leader for off-highway engines for medium and heavy-duty construction applications. The way that we demonstrate sustainability on sites now is in all honesty, the same way that we've done it in the past. In the same way that I expect we're likely to do it in the near to medium term future, and that's providing market-leading internal combustion engines. When we released those products, we took the opportunity to increase power and torque levels that manifested in downsizing at the OE level. When you downsize, you typically see a fuel economy benefit. So that's a plus. We also took the opportunity to take those products to 100% blend approval on fuels like HVO. And then incremental to that, we added in functionalities such as start-stop. So there are many different levers that you can think about on how to get more sustainability just using current spec product. And that's how we're demonstrating sustainability on sites today and now.
Pontus, do you want to pick up off Jeremy and give examples from what you've seen?
Product development is one key thing, both conventional machines and it can be new features, how you spec the products. It's also new technologies like electric machines, studies being done on hydrogen, etc. and so on. Yeah. So that is of course a vital part also for Volvo. Yeah. So that's. But then we also do a lot of collaboration with key customers. Where we call it the four-step approach, where you do an insight, collecting and visualizing the present data on an action site, productivity, CO2, and then you analyze it, you identify improvements to remove waste, yeah. And then you implement the improvement suggested. It can be anything from operator training, efficiency services, installing production monitoring systems. And then of course in the future we also want to look into, okay, what can be alternative technologies on this site? Yeah. How do you sustain it? How do you improve these footprints over time? Yeah. So there's other examples. Yeah.
Michael, there's a lot to pick up from Pontus there as well. He's listed a whole way of doing things, a whole new way of looking into the future. And I just want to pick up on the collaboration with customers. What's your view, firstly, on what your company does to demonstrate sustainability on construction and aggregate sites right now, and what are your thoughts about the collaboration?
Sure thing. So at Topcon, we embody the sustainability primarily through the installation of sensors and machine control onto the machine. And that results in that construction equipment being operated both most efficiently, using less time and also less fuel. And it also results in less total material moved. The other thing that I would say is that there's a fair amount, to your point, a little bit in job planning and coordination. And so using the software so that then you can begin to create, you can begin to coordinate the various machines and the various operations within the workflow. I would also say that the machine control results in safer operations. When the operators have in-cab indicators and they can begin to see where they are, they have fewer work stoppages as well as they have fewer exits from the machine. So in that case, it also makes for a safer work site because when operators are using machine control, it requires fewer grade checkers to come and get in close proximity to the machine. With respect to your collaboration piece, at Topcon, we serve both the aftermarket, so you can retrofit these technologies, as well as work with a number of the major original equipment manufacturers where they build these features in specific to their machine, their brand, their unique value proposition to their customer base. And so in both cases, many times that the technologies will start off in the aftermarket with a bolt-on philosophy, and then slowly but surely get embedded and imbued into the machine.
Pontus, I want to come back to you, and we can't do this discussion without talking about money, finances, viability for contractors to maximise the sustainability of their operations, to win bids, and still, and this is crucial, to make profits, can we?
Of course, there are a lot of regional differences. Only looking into EU, for example, that some countries still have incentives, some countries do not, and so on. We have done studies, for example, showing that if you look at the total project cost for building a road or a big warehouse or something, that the added cost for having sustainable technology is not more than 1-2% of the total project cost extra. So it's also to lift the perspective for the project requesters, that they must be willing. Okay, are you willing to pay 1% extra or not? Because if you look isolated at the contractor part moving the material, then it becomes expensive. So it's about lifting the perspective a lot. But then, of course, there are applications already today. Underground application is one of them, where you have a big cost on ventilation, for example, that you get rid of when moving to electric. Very different pictures, regional and also from application to application and so on. And also the key to lift the horizon a bit and perspective.
Michael, it's not one size fits all, as Pontus is saying, is it? And are you willing to pay 1 or 2% more? Is your company?
Well, the way that we look at it here at Topcon is when you really look at things over the long term, in many cases, sustainability actually results in lowering long-term cost. So that's probably the most significant thing. And those lower costs, in many cases, they may be because you've got increased efficiency in the machine. It may be that because you're moving more material and those kinds of things. And so when you're more and more efficient, and those machines have better on-time performance, as well as you have less waste, where you're coming in on target, on estimate, on budget, those kinds of things really help drive those. I would say that you're talking a little bit about incentives, and so there are various Green Deal programs that we've seen around the world. Probably one of the first and easiest is adding telematics to the machine, because when you add telematics to the machine, now we have the ability to capture the data layers to prove the value proposition that we're talking about, so that then you can see that we have reduced cost over the longer term.
If we're looking at longer term, though, and some companies aren't willing to do that. Jeremy, I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I think the answer is, probably time dependent, and I think it's going to evolve, right? If you think about, requirements that are put in that are going to affect financial viability, if it's some kind of a requirement that says you need latest spec engines, as an example, or latest emission, I think those are really good. They offer a lot of benefit in the here and now. Newer spec equipment is definitely a little bit more expensive than probably prior vintages, but when you think about reduced fluid consumption over the life of the machine, you think about extended maintenance intervals, you think about those type of things. It may not completely offset that, but that puts, I think, a decent amount of money back to the bottom line for the contractors doing the work. And maybe to build on a earlier comment, connectivity. From our perspective as a prime mover, we also partner with leading telematics providers in the industry. Topcon as an example. I firmly believe that having those systems in place and everybody kind of working together is without a doubt going to highlight a lot of inefficiencies in processes, maybe operator training. But I can take two people, put them in the same piece of equipment, and my guess is somebody who knows what they're doing can do that job much more efficiently than somebody like me could do it. And, hard to claim those benefits, I think, in a regulatory environment, but in the real world, as far as how much emissions output you have to get a given job done, huge impacts, I think, are likely to come out of that as the market, further embraces digitalization. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Pontus, we're talking about opportunities, but I just want to come back to these short-term extra costs. Do you know of any emerging funding options that are there to facilitate the transition for contractors and quarry operators?
There are countries where the government are willing to pay extra for road builds, road projects and so on, if it can be done from a CO2 neutral perspective, way and so on. And so. But also important to point out that there are three strong cases for driving emission-free work sites. And one is that customers that want to decarbonize and have signed up to the Paris Agreement, etc. and so on. And then sort of emission-free work zones, etc. is becoming a must for get the license to work. That is already happening. And then, of course, the third one, as we mentioned, that the solutions, sustainable solutions, will increasingly be more and more cost competitive. And we see in Europe, for example, that quarries, they are basically in parity already today. But then it's about getting the products out together with the services and everything.
Michael, how important is it for those funding options to be there to facilitate this transition?
Well, for the most part, the economics of the adoption of the technology are in many cases already there. The various support programs from the government, basically they become an accelerant, right? They just increase the adoption, right? I think they also work to increase and help expand the scope of the opportunity through the workflow. It's the idea that it might be that the economics of a particular technology on a bulldozer or a motor grader or a paver accomplish machine control on the machine. And then it's the coordination, right? That the additional environmental benefits or the additional savings of on-time logistics. The idea that you've got less material on the road, and that it delivers to the paver on time with less emissions, things like that, as well as on temperature. I think that it's a combination of both the economics as well as the additional incentives, whether they're incentives in safety or they're environmental incentives, right? In both cases, I think that you see significant opportunities on the sustainability side that help drive the adoption of the technology.
If we're looking at infrastructure, I want to stick with you, Michael. It's essential for creating a sustainable construction site or quarry. And how will the necessary support capabilities be developed and financed?
I think probably when we begin to start to look at these things, the first thing we begin to look at is we've talked a little bit about operational planning and design, but I think you also need to begin to think about the digital twin and digitization, right? And it's being able to plan that work and then execute the plan, right? And it's the ability for contractors to be able to use these kind of digital tools to accurately assess an opportunity, accurately then deliver with on-time performance to come in on time and on budget. And in many cases, those are the things that begin to truly drive and enable the technology for adoption.
Jeremy, I would like your thoughts on this.
Yeah, from a prime mover perspective, which is obviously the lens that I'm answering from, it all comes back to scale, right? Having some ability to generate scale is key. Ideal solutions are going to have a balance of CapEx, OpEx, and somebody mentioned earlier, I believe, operational integration. Like, how does that technology fit into the site? Like, those three have to come together. In our world, when we think about future solutions, typically for off-highway markets, they tend to have a genesis in heavy-duty on-highway. Right, so we learn from there, we build scale there, and then that offers opportunity to port that over into off-highway spaces. Can't stress enough that further development in internal combustion engines is a core part of our strategy. And off the backs of those future emission regs that we're designing for and releasing platforms for in automotive, we expect we're going to see more stringent off-highway emissions come in, probably early in the next decade. And when you look a little bit beyond that, those platforms are really going to be the enabler for the fuel agnostic platforms that Cummins has talked about, right? Being able to consume hydrogen, natural gas, depending on your market, diesel, biofuels in one platform. So that's kind of our approach to build scale. And obviously, when you build scale in those products, the storage, the generation of something like hydrogen as a fuel, very complementary, right? We're building that out. We're able to consume it in combustion engine form now, and that's going to enable fuel cells to take over at some point in a future state.
Pontus, I want to ask you about the implementation and how might the implementation of new technologies affect the overall cost of ownership?
The capex will go up, the initial investment, of course, that we see initially. The ownership cost will go down, so it's about getting the acceptance for the longer payback. But from our side, it's also to help the customers removing the risk, having alternative business models, equipment as a service, or different type of leasing models. And here we must differ on the power at site investment, sort of the stationary investment versus the product investment. So there are different ways to drive the transformation and the change.
Right. I think Pontus is exactly right. And I think that when you begin to look at the subscription model, right, the idea that pay for performance, and the idea that users want to be able to get the updates, right, and always get the latest and greatest with respect to their capabilities. And so when we as vendors enable that through different business models, that helps both the customer as well as create long-term benefits and reduce long-term cost.
Now, we've been talking about integration of sustainability in companies, and it'd be interesting to understand whether it's already a standard requirement across the board in the bidding process, or is there room for improvement still? And I'll ask Jeremy first.
Yeah, so the disclaimer from me would be we're usually a step removed, right, from the bidding process. So we deal largely with OEMs and in some cases large end fleets. I would encourage, obviously, end users to verbalize those requirements back through their dealers, back through their OE channels, so that they're more visible to folks like ourselves. I can say that it comes up more in OE conversations, probably than it has in the past. So I know there are some signals there. Hard to say if it's a standard or not. It feels very much pocketed still. And when you're in isolated pockets, I come back again to that scale comment from the previous question. It's really hard to profitably navigate isolated pockets of bid requirements, depending on what they are, right? Again, if there's something that drives for a readily available technology that can be put into the market now, fantastic, we should do that. If it's something that tries to drive a technology into the mainstream ahead of when the TCO parity is there, right? Without incentives, those tend to not make a lot of near-term sense, for folks right now.
Pontus, what are your thoughts?
I mean, Jeremy's points are correct, but also to fill in for us, I mean, we see it's not standard yet in the bids and so on, but what we see becoming more and more common is that you must declare the CO2. And you must, the end-to-end CO2 values, how the contractor will perform his project, etc. So can he, and also having the lowest CO2 is one of the bid parameters that the project requester look at and so on. So it's coming more and more for sure. Yes. But we see it's becoming more and more common from the governments, etc. So that's the first step we see, and we also see in cities that now they are starting to talk about this project must be done emission-free and so on, and CO2 neutral, that type of thing. So it's coming. It's not standard yet, but it's coming more and more, yes.
Why do you think it's not standard yet, Michael? across the board? Do you think it's to do with the sizes of companies? What do you think the reasons are?
I think a lot of it is first and foremost kind of public perception. We certainly see that perception varies around the world. In Northern Europe, people are very attuned and much more sensitive to this. In other places where they're more driven by economics before the environment or the people, it's around the productivity. I would say you're exactly right in the fact that increasingly understanding scope 1 and scope 2 emissions from vehicles is becoming important. Probably when I begin to think of adoption of some of these things, one of the ones that I think of pretty obviously is road smoothness. In the United States, there are, in round numbers, there are 50 states. Approximately 24 of those have elements of a smoothness standard. So you've got about half adoption. It's been proven a number of times that a very smooth, accurately paved road takes less material to construct it. And when it's accurately compacted, that smoothness results in lower fuel consumption from all of the cars that travel on it. And they also have less car repair because the cars traveling on it have fewer bumps and have less damage to themselves, as well as that road top will wear more evenly, and then when it needs to be replaced, you can do that more efficiently. So road smoothness is a great example, in my opinion, of a standard that is becoming adopted, but is still not yet widely adopted. And change is always difficult for everybody, but everybody loves progress. And the difference is what's the purpose. And so as more people have an idea of the purpose behind the change, they begin to expand the standard and adopt that changing standard.
Yeah, Jeremy, adopting those standards, more legislation to standardize it. What role and scope is there for further legislation in this area?
Good question. So again, legislation from our perspective tends to be more emissions output driven. When you don't have something that is nationally legislated, as an example, right? Even a one country solution or a one state solution tends to drive disruption in the force a little bit, right? Being able to design for that. So we need standards that are more widespread. We need standards that are, I'm going to say, emissions target driven, not necessarily technology mandating proposals, right? So put the benchmark out for the industry, let all the smart engineers in the industry figure out what's the optimal solution, right, that balances that CapEx, OpEx, operational integration. To me, that's kind of the way we need to approach it.
Pontus.
If it's legislation or not, I think it's more to get the eyes open and drive it from government and also the bigger building companies, whatever, to have the CO2 as one parameter or any type of emission, that to drive the importance of it and sort of starting to highlight it. As I said, as Jeremy pointed out, the legislation, it will always be there, but it will always be different, from country to country and region to region and so on. So
that's a problem, though, isn't it?
Yeah, or opportunity. That's
you can use both, but it is a challenge.
Right.
With legislation, you also see changes happen, and also getting the rise of maybe the future technology that is a must in one country tells that, the TCO is lower in that country versus the country that is still running on old technology. So in the end, I think legislation, of course, helps you, but it's hard to implement everything in all places at once. Yeah, so it's
challenging, Michael, isn't it?
It is, and so that's when I look at these kind of things, and I live in California, which certainly has been leading a number of different aspects of regulation. I'm a big believer in incentives-based adoption, when we can show elements of the benefits, whether those are benefits economically to people or to the environment, and then being able to assign value to those benefits so that then we can create incentives for driving that adoption. And so I'm a glass half full guy. And so I think through from the idea of do we have the incentives out there to get our intended behaviors? And so that's really the way I look at it.
I like that. Pontus, I'm going to come back to you. When and in what circumstances do you anticipate sustainable motive power becoming standard?
Oof. Yeah, that's the easy question. No, same thing here. It will differ a lot, yes. From if we call quarry as one segment, mining is one segment, industrial material handling one segment, and so on. It will differ from segment to segment when it becomes standard. For example, we see in mining that the big mining companies, I mean, they are strong driver towards sustainability. Already in the mindset today, looking into downsizing of the huge trucks that they are using today versus having multiple smaller trucks. So mining is one area where I think it will move to standard quite fast. Yeah. Then industrial handling, I would say that there you see that they have very often the infrastructure in place if they are moving to electric machines. And also we see customers that already today have their own energy production. So for them it's sort of only the investment, then they are running the machines for free basically. So it's very different. Yeah.
Different equipment types really require different things. Michael, what are your thoughts about this on hydrogen and other organic fuels and also electricity as the likely preferred sustainable energy sources?
Well, I defer to my two fellow panelists. They're much stronger at the fuels thing than I am. When I begin to look at our opportunities, you certainly see that in many cases today, right, you could have fossil fuels, you can have fossil diesel, or you can have renewable or biodiesel, right? And so in many cases, I think that you don't necessarily have to throw out one fuel source without understanding that the existing infrastructure and the existing system we have today, it's very mature. And it's evolved to that level of maturity. And so in that case, the idea that of things like ethanol-based fuel, biodiesel, I think that there's an immense amount of opportunity in being able to use elements of the structure that we already have. And then I think that the telematics and the data layers just act as proof of placement. They act as documentation of practice. And in documenting that, they're validating the benefits that we're creating through doing the right thing.
Jeremy, I'm going to take Michael's advice and draw on your expertise on this.
Yeah, it's been mentioned, solution diversity has got to be a consideration in this market. Right? There's so many applications, so many use cases. One application could be used in many different ways, right? So it may not even be a one solution for one application scenario. It probably is likely to not be. Again, it's for us, I don't see a lot of opportunities in that medium and heavy duty space where you've got something besides diesel that's going to be a TCO winner within the decade, right? I think that's important to know. I think you asked a question about hydrogen as a fuel. We've been pretty vocal, pretty open and positive about that. We're obviously very much interested in hydrogen and the success there. Pulling back to some of the earlier questions, if you think about that combination of, CapEx, OpEx, integration to the work site, not to underestimate some of the challenges, but from our perspective, one of the nearer term solutions that we're pretty excited about is hydrogen combustion engines for a lot of reasons, right? They offer benefits for OEMs to, I'm going to say, ease into decarbonization a little bit. You don't have to electrify the full chassis. You're really taking one engine out, putting another one in, packaging tanks, which is not insignificant, right? But it's a little bit of an easier lift in that regard. From a aftermarket channel, which we've not talked about today, engines are something that's familiar to that group, and it's not a small group. If you look at the service network for Cummins and other companies, right, a whole lot of investment, a whole lot of time and energy has been put into readying a capable channel. And thinking that switch is going to flip overnight is going to be probably short-sighted, right? It's going to take time for that to happen. So I think, solution diversity, 100% got to have that. Technology needs time to mature, costs need to come down. And again, that tends to happen first in our markets in non-off-highway spaces. So we obviously keep a watchful eye on the truck markets and other parts of the business that are kind of leading that way on our behalf.
Jeremy, I'm going to stick with you because we're coming to the end of our discussion here, and you've mentioned that you think things are going to take a long time. What's your vision for the sustainable future of the construction and aggregates industry, and how, in very broad terms, do you think we can achieve such an outcome? And that's really important to understand if we can and if we can't.
Yeah, again, solution diversity. I think the other thing is we can't wait for the perfect one, right? We talked at the first question, I think, on what are things we could do now. We need to be exploiting those as much as we can. So for sure, CO2, those type of regulations, they are coming up more in conversation. I would expect those are probably going to find their way into the off-highway reg space at some point. So that's going to be a very near-term improvement that we can make as an industry. Again, thinking about what can you bring to market soon, right? So combustion engines, again, diesel, hydrogen, other fuels that you would put in, we're definitely interested in that in the, I'm going to say, near to medium term. And again, right, there are batteries are a great option, compact equipment, possibly some of the lower end medium duty construction. Probably when you get bigger than that, I would say that's going to take longer time to play out. And fuel cells, we believe, have a place in the industry in the longer term. Probably not so much within this decade, at least not more widespread. So I would say the way it needs to play out is probably rationally, something that again takes into consideration those three things: CapEx, OpEx, and maybe even most important of all, how it actually fits into the job site and how people get the work done. No shortage of construction or mining that needs to happen, within the decade. So we've got to do what we can to enable that work to happen as efficiently and sustainably as possible.
Thank you, Jeremy. Pontus.
Yeah, it can be done. That's our belief. Yeah, so that's and here, of course, collaboration will be a key, and partnerships between the OEMs, as I said, governments, or sort of the customer's customer, if you say it like that. The customers, partnerships around charging, digital services. Topcon is one of them, of course. Yeah. So everyone needs to contribute, because sustainability and the transformation, that needs to be looked at from an end-to-end perspective. Yeah. It's not only about having the correct products available. Yeah. So it's key to have the focus on the total solution, yeah. Products and digital services, etc. The job to be done. But at the same time, we must look at the total energy consumption. It's not only about the usage phase. Yeah. It's everything, the production of hydrogen or production of electricity or biofuel and so on. So that's important to have in mind. Yeah.
You get the last word, kind of, Michael.
Well, thank you, and certainly appreciate the opportunity. In our thinking, sustainability is and ESG it's here to stay. Profit continues to be important, but it's a little bit of a balance with people and planet, right? And so increasingly institutional investors are beginning to prioritize those elements. And so, and our ability to transparently explain and show how we are meeting those benefits is our opportunity, right? As we talked about a little bit earlier, I'm an incentives-based guy, and so when we see that the incentives are aligned to get us down the behavior that gets us in that realm, that just increases adoption and increases the rate at which adoption occurs. And so I would say for the world highway World Highways viewership, that's where really we see it going, and so the rate at which those incentives and that those opportunities avail themselves, I believe that you'll see many more aspects of ESG and sustainability continue to be adopted. But the idea that ESG awareness and ESG sensitivity, it's here to stay. And so it just comes down to, it's now in our landscape, and so it's how do we align to that change.
Well, what a fascinating discussion, I must say. I hope all of you enjoyed it, and obviously we hope everyone else enjoys listening to you as well. Michael Gomes, Jeremy Harsin, Pontus Evertsson, thank you all very much. And that's it. We hope that you enjoyed our second roundtable discussion on sustainability in the construction and quarrying industries, and that you learned a couple of new things. If you would like to see any of our other roundtables, please go to the World Highways and Aggregates business websites and put Roundtable into the search box. It's all there. Thank you for joining us.